In 2022, Helena Buonanno Foulkes came closer than almost anyone expected to unseating a sitting Rhode Island governor. A political newcomer with a private sector resume, she challenged Governor Dan McKee in the Democratic primary and came within striking distance of victory. Now she's back, older politically, clearer about the job, and once again asking voters to trust her with the state's highest office. Helena Buonanno Foulkes joins us in person here at the Loft to talk about what she learned from that first run in 2022, what's changed since, and why she believes Rhode Island needs a different kind of leadership right now.
Bartholomew Town.
We're brought to you in part by the University of Rhode Island Online. Are you passionate about preserving our planet? URI Online offers marine and environmental science programs designed to empower the next wave of environmental leaders. Dive into programs like their Master of Oceanography, explore sustainability with a Master of Environmental Management, or prepare for impactful careers with their Ocean Policy and Science Graduate Certificate and Blue MPA. Whether you're interested in protecting our oceans, conserving ecosystems, or driving sustainability forward, URI Online graduate and certificate programs are led by expert faculty who will provide you with the hands-on knowledge and real-world skills needed to succeed, all from the comfort of your home. Explore your potential and make waves in your career with URI Online's flexible programs. URI.edu/online to learn more. Okay, welcome into Bartholomew Town. I'm Bill Bartholomew. Helena Buonanno Foulkes challenged Dan McKee in that Democrat primary, which, remember, that was a five-way race. Former Secretary of State Nellie Gorbea was also in the mix then and had considerable support around the state. And you can make the argument that the Gorbea vote was, in some ways, potential McKee voters and potential Buonanno Foulkes voters if Gorbea wasn't in that race. Regardless, as it's currently constituted here in 2026, this is a two-way race. McKee on defense now, tough polling numbers, Washington Bridge. He's battling against even just a psychological impact of negativity that I think a lot of Rhode Islanders have about state government right now, not just because of the bridge, but when they look around and see issues like healthcare, when they look around and see issues like education. I think that polling shows this, by the way, but there's also no doubt an anecdotal sense of we're just not going in the right direction. So it's right for Helena Foulkes to come in and try to position herself as a bit of an outsider and offer what she's claiming is a reset on a lot of the areas in Rhode Island government that she says have fallen into disrepair under the McKee administration. All right, so we've got a long way to go until the primary in September, but over the course of the winter, it has been very clear since she announced her candidacy, Foulkes has been out in a way that I didn't see, having covered her in 2022. I didn't see in that earlier race where she's actually on the ground with a hodgepodge of, we'll call them liberal causes. You know, she's taking photos and posting them on Instagram from RIPTA buses, trying to position herself, at least from a visibility standpoint, as somebody who's involved on the grassroots level. I think that's a very different angle. If you pair that with the institutional and certainly business support that she has coming off a wave of yet another major fundraising effort, I mean, she has considerably more dough than McKee right now. So there's no doubt that in many ways you can look at this race totally differently than 2022. Again, head-to-head, McKee, Foulkes, you don't have Gorbea, plus you had Matt Brown and Luis Daniel Munoz kind of floating in the mix back in 22. You got head-to-head this time. McKee way more on defense. Foulkes fundraising and also on the ground at the grassroots level. What does this all mean? We'll find out as Helena Buonanno Foulkes joins me from the Loft here in person on Bartholomew Town. And we thank our supporters for their support of local journalism, including Navigant Credit Union. As Rhode Island's first ever member-owned credit union, Navigant Credit Union has been a staple in the local business community for more than 108 years. Today, Navigant is a $3.4 billion institution serving more than 136,000 members across 25 physical branch locations. But since its founding in 1915, the mission has never changed. Navigant Credit Union's team of financial professionals have remained committed to improving the financial well-being of the families, businesses, and communities they serve across Rhode Island. Learn more at navigantcu.org. From the Loft in Providence, my conversation with Democrat candidate for governor, Helena Buonanno Foulkes. This is Bartholomew Town. Helena Buonanno Foulkes, welcome back to Bartholomew Town. I think the last time we had an on-air conversation was the debate in 2022 when you were part of that five-person field in the Democratic primary. You came very close to defeating Governor McKee. What did you learn from that run that you are kind of applying, digesting, and has changed your approach this go-around?
Yeah, good to see you. Thanks for having me on. I learned a lot. I did win on election day, but I lost by 3,000 votes. And I learned mostly that it's really important to be authentically yourself. It was very hard to run as a first-time candidate. You get a lot of very well-intended advice. But at the end of the day, the last 30 days, I threw caution to the wind and I said, I'm just going to be myself, and that seemed to work out. But I also learned that it's very hard to do a race like that in 11 months. And so it gave me an opportunity to really step back and say, I always believe things happen for a reason in life. I'm old enough that many things in my life have not worked out the way I wanted them to. And usually when they don't work out, another door opens and something really good does happen. So I decided I needed to be open to what that could look like. I really wanted to do it again, though. It didn't take me long to figure that out. But I knew this was an opportunity to meet more people. You know, when I ran last time, when I launched, I like to say we were all stuck on Zoom. So I didn't really start physically meeting people until very late in the process. So I have spent the last couple of years showing up at places that people least expect me to be, introducing myself, listening. That's the big thing I've been able to do. And I've had a whole series of gatherings in people's living rooms and kitchens where I ask them 3 questions. I say, love to know who you are, what you do for a living, and one thing you'd really love the next governor to do. And people have a lot of great ideas, so that's what I've been doing.
What's the number one thing you're hearing right now out there from people in terms of their concerns on the ground, Rhode Island specific, within your purview? Obviously, governors have a purview on a national and global stage too, but basically on a Rhode Island level, what are you hearing?
Maybe I'll say 3.
Sure.
I would say the bridge, housing, and healthcare.
Sure.
So, you know, the bridge is pretty obvious, but it's really affecting people's lives. And not just on the East Bay side, right? Just coming up from Warwick and all those places. I can come back to that if you want, but I really think that the biggest thing I hear from people is a frustration. And it's really brought to life by that sign that says, thank you for your patience, that went up not so long ago. And I have people all the time say, I'm not patient. I feel very frustrated. And what I'm angry about on behalf of Rhode Islanders is that the governor really played politics with that bridge. And what I mean by that is, who knows why this situation happened. I think we're going to learn more as time goes on, but let's give him a pass on that. Once the bridge was down, I really fault the governor for how he handled it, with Director Alvidi, obviously. I called for Alvidi to be fired, but I'll give you just one example. The governor played politics. He wanted a bridge built before the next election. So he sent out an RFP with very strong penalties. If you didn't hit that timeline, you wouldn't win, you'd pay penalties. And 6 months went by, and he learned at the end of the 6 months, no one bid on the contract, right? So I've done lots of RFPs in my life. And when you run an RFP, you don't wait 6 months. You figure out how people respond and you adjust. And so we lost essentially close to a year in a really bad process, and that adds to people's time and money. So the bridge is one. Healthcare's very real and true, and I would say in the gatherings that I had that I just described, the way it comes up for people is they say, you know, I'm really worried my doctor's going to retire. It's that basic. Like, forget all the complexity of healthcare. I know there's the 2 hospitals, we can talk about that, but it's a very fundamental fear that people have that their doctor will retire and they won't find a new one. I had a mom recently send me a letter. Her pediatric dentistry office is closing in Providence. So now what does she do? So it's all the very real things that go on in healthcare. We can go back to that. And housing. Housing consistently has been the number one issue, I would say, as I sit in people's living rooms. And a lot of it is just that, I think the thing that's been striking for me is the people who are my age and their kids are living back with them, and they may even have college degrees and they can't afford a home. And that makes people really say, gosh, you know, I don't know if I'll be able to afford to live a good life here. And that is always what made Rhode Island so attractive. And I have to tell you, at the end of all these gatherings, People have been griping and complaining. It's 50 minutes in, and then someone always raises their hands and says, but gosh, I love living here.
Sure.
It's such a great place. I just wish it would live up to its promise.
Yeah, I think that's a general, I mean, there's always what some people call the putrid Rhode Island gene, which is you hear, oh, this state, and it's usually attached to some state employee's salary or something of that sort. There's a traditional complaint. But I do think your read is no doubt correct that the affordability issues right now and the psychology issue right now of where the state's going are definitely major issues. I want to go back to the Washington Bridge. Look, there's no doubt, I don't think anybody, in fact, I don't think anybody has been on the media side more critical of Alvedi and broadly the communications rollout that they put forth, which includes signage, which includes RFPs, internal, external. They just didn't sell the state that this project was going to be managed in a way that felt like it was progressing at a rate of that would be comfortable for the average Rhode Islander. And there's no doubt businesses have been impacted. There's no doubt it's an annoying thing. I go over the bridge every day. At the same time, it has gotten a lot better. Rumors that Alvedi is going to retire sometime in the near future, pretty solid rumors. So as governor, what would be the first thing you would do with the bridge as currently constituted, both in terms of infrastructure, the physical bridge itself, other pieces of infrastructure, but what would you do differently on the night of December 13th, 2023? Again, easy to play Monday morning quarterback, but looking at it from a communication strategy, what are the pillars of difference between you and how the governor has managed this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's two issues, actually. I would add competency and communication. And I do think competency is an issue that runs through everything McKee does, in terms of you can have, a great statement, but if you actually can't deliver the goods for people, that is the job of the governor. We can talk more about competency, but communications is so fair. So I'm pretty sure the night of the closing, or when it was announced, the governor was nowhere to be seen. I think he was at Hope High School basketball practice.
Yeah, and an opening for a pizza restaurant.
And I think the next night, one of Alvedi's guys had a fundraiser, and they all showed up at that. I mean,
John Igliosi.
That sends a very strong signal to people, and one of the things I often hear is this feels like a place where you got to know a guy. And the ultimate sign of you got to know a guy is showing up at a fundraiser and not being on the ground, talking to people, expressing that you're sorry. I don't think anyone necessarily blamed McKee for this. It's a long time coming. Who knows? We will find out. But a lot of it is how you show up in the moment. And I've learned that in my career. Things don't always go right, but if you show up and look people in the eyes and you tell them you're sorry, and then they got to see you working. They got to see you showing up and being there with businesses on both sides of the bridge. I mean, all the traffic that backed up in Providence, right? It just felt like no one was listening. You had trucks barreling through Wayland Square, and so just the mayhem, the lack of communication, the lack of remorse was, I think, a big miss on the governor's part.
When you look at this as on the whole, you mentioned competency with the McKee administration. Mm-hmm. What else jumps out to you specifically in terms of incompetence? Because that's sort of the charge you're making. You're charging that the governor is incompetent. Mm-hmm. How much of it is incompetence versus just a difference of fiscal strategy? The example I would give would be gas tax used to partially fund RIPTA last year, right? Mm-hmm. Now you're recalling that gas tax in your proposed budget. McKee's recalling that. That's a fiscal instrument. A lot of people don't like that. They say RIPTA wasn't properly funded last year. Will it be properly funded this year? But that's virtue of being governor and having the priority setting position that the governor does. Is that, how much of it is difference versus you genuinely believe that Dan McKee is incompetent?
I genuinely do believe he's incompetent. I think he has no idea how to manage. I think that the most important thing a governor does is hire great people to surround him or her and hold them accountable, be clear on the deliverables you expect. That is what I learned to do in my career. I led a team of 200,000 people when I was at CBS. Problems happen every day. You cannot touch everything, but if you don't have strong people sitting on top of each of those functions, and I would add, not just strong, but shoring up your own weaknesses, because we all have weaknesses as leaders, so you got to have people around you who do that. So I really believe there's a real competency issue, and I would say even within the DOT. The fact that Peter Alviti could not remember the name of the engineer, the person who's in charge of inspections, and his excuse was this person was 5 levels deep, that's terrible. I mean, we're 2 years in and you should know this person's name. So all that I put under competency. To your point, I also think it's politics. Look, I'm new to this field, but Dan McKee all of a sudden finds religion on RIPTA the year of an election. That seems very curious to me. Last year, I spent a bunch of time showing up at RIPTA listening sessions and all across the state. And I have to tell you, it was weather like this. I remember the first one I attended in February at URI, and people had taken the bus. It was President's Day, so it was hard to get around, and crammed into a room, and people were talking about how they were going to not be able to go to school or might not get to their job and therefore would lose their apartment. I mean, such heartfelt stories. And still in the end, McKee couldn't find $10 million to fund RIPTA. So a lot of bus routes had to be cut. Now, by the way, he found $4.5 million to have 2 permanent tow trucks on the Washington Bridge, which, you know, as I go over that bridge, sometimes they seem to be adding to the traffic. So that's $4.5 million there. And now all of a sudden we're in an election year and he's going to fully fund RIPTA. So I'm glad he's finally doing it. But I think it shows a really inconsistency in this constant theme of, oh, I got to do something which is politically appealing right now. I've been governor for a very long time. I'm asking you to make me one of the longest serving governors in the state's history. So I'll turn it on this year, and that we could do better. I just know we can.
When you look at housing right now, what's the biggest challenge in your mind? Is it on a development side, an incentivization side? Is it municipalities like Johnston or Narragansett that have had, we'll just say that they have butted heads with state leadership? Is it just a matter of, hey, we've got to completely reimagine how we do housing, or all the above, or anything else? How do you solve the housing crisis as governor?
It's a really, really hard crisis, so I don't want to minimize it. It will take time to fix, but just to put it in perspective, Rhode Island ranks 50th in the country in housing production per capita, 50th, dead last. We need roughly 24,000 more units to start to bend the cost curve, because once we get enough supply, prices of housing will start to come down. Last year, we built 990 houses. So at that rate, it's going to be 25 years. Now, the governor loves to talk about permitting. That's great, but that is not housing. And he's been governor for a very long time. So I think we need to really fundamentally rethink how we approach housing. I'm going to roll out some housing policy specifics in the next couple of weeks, but from my perspective, we need to think about, for example, how do we just incentivize a whole bunch more? We're sitting in a beautiful old building. We have them all over Rhode Island. Historic tax credits have historically been an amazing way to convert these old buildings into housing. There are many of them in the urban core. If you ride a bus from downtown Providence, the R line to the Central Falls train, you pass many, many old mill buildings which could be converted to housing. But you got to have the right incentive structure. I also believe that we need to just think differently. I think the traditional way of approaching housing isn't working. So we've got to find ways. If you think about the average income in the state, the average, let's say, household is making $90,000 to $100,000, and the average price of a house right now in the market is $520,000. That math doesn't work. They can't afford that, and health care and everything else in their lives, and child care. So the question is, how do we produce a house that costs $350,000 for them and really make it achievable? I want firefighters and teachers to be able to afford to live in the towns they're working in, and I want this place to be a place that can attract families, attract young people. That's also it's a component of inhibiting our economic growth. There are a lot of companies that shy away from our state because people can't afford to live here. So we've got to have an all of the above approach. I'm much more excited about incentives and driving the right behavior, because people will want to build more housing, than I am a stick approach that I would say of the small towns. I mean, There are some towns that just are fundamentally not so excited about more housing. It's oftentimes why people chose to live there. At the end of the day, those are smaller towns where we won't be able to build that much housing anyway. So I want to marry up first, as I've always approached change in my life. I want to marry up with the people who want the change. And I think there are mayors in Rhode Island who are really eager for more housing, and that's where I can start.
What's your take on Providence right now? The city council has proposed a rent stabilization package. Mayor Smiley has long indicated his opposition to rent control or stabilization. Look, there are carve-outs in the Providence deal that make it so a greater than 4% rent increase is available to certain developers, certain scenarios in terms of upgrades. There's no doubt the carve-outs are essential to anything like this. Otherwise, you have a St. Paul, Minnesota scenario where you just put rent control in and nobody builds. That does happen. But you also have New York City and a million other places where it has trued out with the right guardrails. Are you in favor of any level of rent control or rent stabilization?
At this point, and as I said, I'm still working on my policy, but at this point, I don't think that rent control is the right approach. I just think that it's really well intended, by the way. I applaud everyone who's worked on it. I'd like to sit with them and learn more. I'm guessing that there are some really good ideas in there that we could take advantage of, and I'm always open to the fact that there are things that I can learn along this journey. But I want this to be a place where we're really incentivizing more build out and more housing, and I think in the very long term that's what will happen. In the short term, I think there are things we need to do to make sure that people are not getting kicked out of their housing. I mean, I serve on the Crossroads board. I worry a lot about homelessness. Probably the most effective thing that Crossroads has done in the last few years is give people funds for their rent. A couple months of rent support and assistance means that a family won't end up on the street. So thinking differently about that, the people really in need, and making sure we're supporting people is very important to me. I want Rhode Island to be a place where absolutely no one is homeless. We used to be a pretty good example of a state that took care of people and didn't allow them to sleep out in this weather. And I think all those things we need to factor in as we think about housing.
President Trump recently said that there is going to be a February 1st deadline where all funding to sanctuary states will be cut off. Who knows what that means? Who knows if that he even remembers that he said that. But let's go ahead and imagine that he's being serious, that there's going to be a literal shutting off of the valve of federal funding. Obviously, this would go to court. There'd be a zillion injunctions. This would look something like academics that were battling it out if this really happened. But on the whole, how would you interface with an administration right now that is literally, I don't think anybody can objectively sit back and say that this is, at minimum, changing the direction of this country and planet, is flirting with, if not, in my judgment, outright fascism at this time. Yet at the same time, we see Governor Walz in Minnesota having to sort of play the line a little bit. We've seen Governor McKee try to do this in the past, where he's gone to the White House, taken photos with the president and tried to encourage a relationship there. Now he's backtracked and has literally put the anti-Trump message front and center in his own political campaign. How would you interface with the Trump administration?
I think Trump's a bully. What he's doing in Minnesota is absolutely horrifying and frightening, and the idea that ICE can walk up to anyone on the street and ask for their identification, I mean, it is true, it is fascism, and it absolutely has no place in this country. Grabbing people from their homes who are U.S. citizens in their pajamas in the freezing cold. So the job of the governor is to defend the people of that state. And I will be a governor who will work every day for the people of the state, make sure they are safe. We should be prosecuting the ICE agents who are doing all these horrific things. And, look, we want a safe environment. Everyone wants a safe environment. But this is a long way from Trump telling us he was only going to send back the gang members and big, terrible criminals. This is not what the people of Rhode Island want. And I know for a fact so many people, I know people in my life who are being affected by this right now. They came here, they're dreamers, and they've been doing all the right things. They work, they pay taxes, and we should be protecting those people and supporting them. That's what I'll do when I'm going.
Two quick ones here. I know we're nearly out of time. Economic development, we could do an entire episode on this, perhaps we should. Hasbro is one easy thing to look at. You put out a statement about Plant City. I would dispute that it's entirely the Washington Bridge that caused Plant City. As someone who's gone there nearly every day for 3.5 years, I think there's a lot of other factors. I'll lay that out at another point in time because we're out of time now. I'm sorry to dangle that here, but I do think it's worth considering when we look at the 195 land. Plant City was an anchor, no doubt. I walk that thing every night, and you look around and you go, well, where's everything else? Hasbro could have been a perfect tenant there as a core of a kind of design/new tech economy. Theoretically, that's what we want downtown.
Yeah.
They said, no thanks. We probably could have given them the mall and the airport, and they still were going to head to the South Street, the Seaport District in Boston. You're in the room with Hasbro or any other major firm looking to relocate to or stay in Rhode Island. Your elevator pitch is?
This is an amazing place for your people to live. Going to Boston is going to cost your employees an enormous amount of both time and money. And you have an incredible base in Rhode Island. We've got the best universities in the world. It's a lot more affordable than Boston. You have access to all the leaders. We care so much about you. We are going to invest in great paying jobs because ultimately that's what lifts people up. And I want to be the governor that is attracting the best companies. I don't accept the premise that Hasbro was going to leave anyway, there's nothing we could do. I think absolutely when the governor saw a new guy running that company who had no ties to Rhode Island, that first month I would have had lunch or dinner with him and said, what does it take for you to invest even more in Rhode Island? I'd love, and I mentioned at the very beginning of this that one of the things I've loved doing in the last couple of years is listening. And when you listen and you ask people what they want, they usually tell you. So I think there were early indications that were missing. I think there are a lot of big companies here that we should not take for granted. I'll use CVS as an example. 7,000 employees in CVS, from CVS here in Rhode Island. They have 300,000 all across this country. The CEO of CVS has governors from every state calling him, saying, please come set up shop with us. Not only will I defend the Rhode Islanders who are working there, I want more of them here. I also want to be a state where, as a small business owner, it's really easy to set up shop. Instead of having, I had a guy who wanted to start a food truck business in one of my gatherings, and he said, I have to go to 14 different state and local agencies to get all the permits and paperwork.
That's right.
We're small. We should be able to do that in one-stop shop like they do in Worcester, Mass. And then finally, I want to invest in the places where we're really strong. I think the creative arts is a place, just as you alluded to. We are the creative capital in Providence, and we really are that. We are also the ocean state because we have a really robust ocean economy that is already flourishing on its own but needs real leadership. And so at the end of the day, I look forward to doing all that. I want to make sure we're bringing more jobs in so people can afford to live here and so we can invest in all the social services that people who live here really need. 10
seconds, your message to the voters that didn't vote for you but are known Democrat primary voters, didn't vote for you in 2022.
Right.
What do you say to them?
I love your vote. I'm working very, very hard. I'm looking forward to meeting you. There's still 8 months. I think the best thing about Rhode Island is we can all meet the people who lead our state. I hope that I get a chance to meet you, and I really would love your support.
Helena Buonanno Foulkes, Democrat for governor, challenging right now Governor McKee. We'll see if that field expands in due time. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks so much, Bill.
And thanks for joining us here on Bartholomew Town, where we're brought to you in part by Half Street Group. They bring a new generation's perspective to leadership communications, strategic public relations, and digital marketing. Half Street helps organizations and leaders take control of their own stories and manage their reputations. They get results for their clients by focusing on audience, message, and culture, and by leveraging their decade-long relationship with media and opinion leaders in the Ocean State and throughout New England. Join me and Half Street Group founder and president Mike Rea for a conversation every month about news of the day, the hottest media analysis, and a look behind the scenes at how impactful leaders drive conversations. Learn more at halfstreetgroup.com. Also, thanks to our friends at Newport Film for their support. Visit newportfilm.com for all the latest screening details. Remember, we're here for you every Tuesday and Thursday, and as breaking news comes in, and we'll be here ramping up coverage more and more as we approach proper election season. What's that? I don't know. When it starts to get warm out and people are really starting to pay attention. In the meantime, thank you for making Bartholomew Town a part of your media diet. We know you've got a lot of choices, and we appreciate you choosing us. I'm Bill Bartholomew. We'll talk next time. Bartholomew Town is brought to you by Navigant Credit Union, Half Street Group, the University of Rhode Island Online, and Newport Film.